So, welcome to the Machine Sessions. And for this episode, I am talking to Father Stephen Freeman. Now, Father Stephen is a retired Orthodox priest in the Orthodox Church in America. Specifically, he was a priest in Tennessee, although now he's back home in South Carolina. So, Father Stephen writes a popular blog, Glory to God for All Things. He has a podcast, Glory to God, both of which are hosted on the Ancient Faith channel. He's also the author of, I think it's two books, Father. Is it
Yeah.
Everywhere Present, Christianity in a One-Story Universe, and Face to Face, Knowing God Beyond Our Shame? And beyond that, like me, he's probably written countless articles. I don't know if you've ever counted how many you've written, Father, but it's got to be hundreds. And all of these, like the books and like the talks, engage contemporary culture from an Orthodox Christian perspective in a way which I think combines learning, wisdom, and humor, which is a rare combination, especially on the internet. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to speak to Father Stephen as part of this series, because to me, his writing amounts to a powerful critique of what I've called machine modernity from an Orthodox Christian perspective. And actually, I have to say, Father, your talks and your writings are certainly one of the things that influenced me to move towards the Orthodox Church once I started to move into, much to my own surprise, to move into Christianity to become a Christian. Um, the question of where that put me in relation to the world as it was and what the church had to say about that was I suppose something that had been on my mind, and I've always found your writing and speaking really illuminating. So there we are. So this is Father Stephen, and I suppose we could start by talking about your journey, if it's not too boring a place to start. When I first heard that you used to be the pastor of a church in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, I thought that sounded like the kind of place where Huckleberry Finn would hang out, which is one of the intrigues for me, because as an Englishman, you see, I've only got two sources for my understanding of the American South, which is Mark Twain and the Dukes of Hazzard. And I've always seen you more as the Mark Twain guy than a Dukes of Hazzard guy. So so I thought, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, this sounds wonderful. I want to go there. But maybe you could just start by telling me and anyone who's watching how you became an Orthodox Christian in America, and how this kind of developed into, I suppose, the Orthodox worldview that you've got now in your relationship to the world.
Well, I'll try to do a bit of a brief version. Um, I was born into a nominal Baptist family, which in South Carolina, in fact, the American South, that's probably by far the largest denomination. And but it was a pretty, someone, there were conservative things about it, but my family, I never saw. We did not pray as a family. We did not read the Bible as a family. Religion did not play a large part of our family life, but uh, except for the fact that we believed in God, and were, would have been shocked if anybody had said bad things about Jesus. Just really. But I grew up in that. At age 13, I quit. Uh, it was the mid 1960s. There was a lot of things going on, especially the South was beginning to come out of the sort of apartheid that had been the official position here. Um, and the Baptist church I was associated with as a child was very, actually rather racist and all. And at age 13, with a lot of kind of influences coming in, liberal influences. I quit that. Had a lot of disgust about what I'd been taught, and didn't do anything for a couple of years. Listened to the Beatles a lot. Uh, it's all those English influences.
Well,
At age 15, my older brother, who actually was very influential in a lot of things for me, he was in college, started dating a girl who was an Episcopalian, and took me to the downtown Episcopal Church here in Greenville, South Carolina, which was a beautiful old Victorian 19th century building, beautiful stained glass, uh, one of the largest pipe organs in South Carolina, wonderful clergy, just an incredible church. And I literally had just never seen beauty in a church, ever. My little Baptist church, country church I grew that I went to some as a child was very plain, white walls, just very plain. Went there, fell in love with it. Was kind of birthed back into a Christianity that influences there. A little while after that, my older brother was shipping out to Vietnam. He gave me a copy of a collection of essays by Leo Tolstoy called On Civil Disobedience and Nonviolence. He gave it to me and said, Steve, read these and don't go. So off he went. And so it's really interesting that Tolstoy is kind of got out on the fringes of Russian Orthodoxy and stuff. There's a lot of stuff about that. And of course, was a famous pacifist. But one of the things that was striking about him was that he was the first serious person I'd ever read who took Jesus at his word. I mean, and it wasn't just picking and choosing for some sort of, evangelical thing, but particularly focusing on the Sermon on the Mount, and that Jesus actually meant what he said when he said it, and which was the first time I had encountered anything that made me want to read the Bible. And I started off with Matthew, reading and you get to chapter 5, you're suddenly in the Sermon on the Mount, and I didn't know it, but it was quietly radicalizing me.
Yeah, it does that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like if you actually think Jesus means love your enemy, that'll do things to you. Let's see. Quick short versions. I ran into the charismatic movement into Jesus freaks as I was finishing high school, and spent 2 years living in a commune. Went to college, returned to the Episcopal Church, which is Anglican for those of you across the pond, and went to seminary from college, got married while I was in college, went to seminary in Chicago, was ordained, served a parish here in South Carolina for about 8 years, went on, and actually, when I was in college, a buddy of mine that I had lived in the commune with came up to me one day and handed me the book, The Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church by Vladimir Lasky, which is not the first book on Orthodoxy I would ever recommend to anybody. But I read it, and I knew I had suddenly, that I was reading things in the deep end of the pool. This was, I probably didn't understand 80% of what I read, but the 20% was just amazing. When I went to seminary, one of my professors in seminary had done his doctoral work at Harvard under Father George Florovsky, who was one of the great Russian theologians of the 20th century, one of the great emigre theologians. And he actually described himself as a Palamite theologian, as a devoted to St. Gregory Palamas, which was interesting in an Episcopalian. He used to take me to meetings with the Anglicans and the Orthodox back when the dialogues were going on. And I met people like Father Alexander Schmemann and others. I met Metropolitan Callistos Ware, who was invited to my seminary to speak long before he was a bishop. All of that was, so I was reading Orthodoxy and kind of, there's sort of an Anglican thing that there's what you do in church, and then there's your theology as an avocation. Right. The high churchman's reading Catholic stuff, the low churchman's reading Calvin. They've all got their things, and the lady priest is reading Buddhism. Whatever's going on. And I'm sorry, that's a terrible swipe, but
are we getting letters from lady priests now?
Yeah, I know. I love them all. So, nonetheless, I'm funny. My seminary was the seminary that Alan Watts graduated from.
Oh, right, really? Okay.
Oh, yes.
I didn't even know he went to seminary. Okay.
Yeah. He was an Episcopal priest for a while before
right.
Whatever it was, he became. So
you rebelled in a different direction.
Oh, yeah. But so I kind of was interested in Orthodoxy. After my 8 years, I went back to Duke to work on a doctorate in theology, and this time studied under a Methodist, a Brit from Yorkshire, Jeffrey Wainwright, wonderful. He was always quick to say he was a British Methodist, not a United Methodist.
Hmm.
He was the strangest Methodist. He prayed the rosary. It was quite interesting. But he had done his doctoral work in Switzerland under Nikos Nisiotis, one of the great Greek theologians of the 20th century. And I concentrated on Orthodox work while I was at Duke. Wrote my thesis on the theology of icons. When I finished Duke, I realized that without going into all the details, the morning after I defended my thesis, I got up, knelt by my bed at a friend's apartment where I was staying, and prayed, "Oh God, make me Orthodox."
Hmm.
And I meant two things by that. One was, I want to be Orthodox. And the other one was, you'll have to make me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's sort of heel marks dragging in the
Mhm.
ground there. It was 7 years after that I was received into the church. We began to make explorations. I had only ever visited in an Orthodox church once, and that was a Greek service, and it was all in Greek. We were introduced to the Orthodox Church in America. I met the late Archbishop Dmitri, who was the first convert to become a bishop in the Western Hemisphere. He's an amazing man in Texas. And he brought us into the church. So in 1998, I left the Episcopal Church. Literally, my last Sunday was February 8th. The next Sunday, my family and I were chrismated, and I was immediately appointed to start a mission in Knoxville, Tennessee, near Oak Ridge, and began preparing, sort of reading, and under the direction of another priest. And the next year was ordained as an Orthodox priest. And now that's better than half of my ordained life has been as an Orthodox priest. I eventually became dean of the Appalachian area and took had a role in starting 5 Orthodox churches across that area. This has been, Archbishop Dmitri was an amazing missionary, planting churches, taking convert priests like myself. When I converted, I thought the rest of my life would be in a storefront, living in a trailer with a secular job, because there was a lot of guys doing that. My first 2 years, I had a secular job working as a hospice chaplain, semi-secular. But we started in a living room, moved to a warehouse, then a storefront, and then eventually bought a building. This has been true all over the South. I think there were 4 OCA churches in the entire American South when Archbishop Dmitri was sent here. By the time of his death, there were over 80. And just, it's an amazing story, and it continues going on, and they're growing. I think 2 things were happening that really encapsulate all of that. On the one hand, the Anglicanism that I had found as a teenager, which was actually fairly traditional, old prayer book, and I would sort of say a C.S. Lewis style Anglicanism. That would have really described the priest and the church where I had joined. Over the years, was moving further and further away from that. I was involved in very active as an Episcopal priest in, if you will, the resistance to the idea of changing the church's moral teaching on sexual relations and ordinations and things like that. But you just do what you can. But many, many things were changing, and I should have known it from the beginning. I remember one of my professors in seminary said he couldn't say that Jesus is God, and I thought, well, gosh, what about very God of very God? Isn't that sort of in the creed? He said, I cross my fingers when I get to that part of the creed, and oh, how charming. But it was, frankly, that kind of thing has sort of gutted the church, the Anglican Church, including in England, that go and you might be a little old lady attending church, reading your prayer book and believing it, and your priest doesn't.
Mm.
And that's, I mean, what can you do with a thing like that? The first priest I served with when I was ordained deacon, I very piously asked, did he want to read the office together in church that first week? And he said, "Oh, I don't pray." And I remember
I've never
thinking,
heard that
"Oh,
from a priest before.
okay, yes,
Okay.
I don't pray." Yeah, I soon after heard his sermons, and I thought, yes, 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 you
I
don't
can
pray.
tell.
I
Right.
can tell. But I was such an arrogant little deacon. But so, I mean, I was. But um, I what I found in Orthodoxy was, in fact, uh, what I thought I had found in Anglicanism, which was the ancient church.
Mm.
Um, and I oftentimes, I mean, I think there's people who look at Orthodoxy and kind of fall in love with it. You know, they like all that it's doing, and it is beautiful. It's wonderful. For me, it was desperately scary. I was leaving. I mean, my last Episcopal church, I had 800 parishioners. It was large, you know, it had a large staff and all of that sort of thing. I left that to start in a living room uh, with a very, very modest income and a secular job. And it was scary. I didn't know what I was doing. I was learning as I went. Um, it wasn't clear that the mission would succeed. You know, what if this fails?
Mm.
Uh, we wound up investing all of our savings in the course of starting that mission so that we wound up with nothing. I remember saying to my wife, because I had actually signed the lease on the warehouse we were renting. And I said to her, I said, you know, if this doesn't work, we're going to go bankrupt. But on the other hand, this is worth going bankrupt for.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
that's it's always a good question to ask yourself, isn't it? What in your
yeah,
life is worth going bankrupt for?
yeah. I mean, I became Orthodox ultimately because I believed and saw that it was what it said it was.
Mm.
Um, but without any idealism.
Mm.
I could go into that deeply. I've said to people that in becoming Orthodox, I joined the original argument.
Mm.
If one reads the book of Acts, the argument is there already. I mean,
Mm.
Christ begins the church with Jews and Greeks, which are the two most argumentative people on the face of the earth, as far as I can tell.
Right.
And, you know, and I say that in front of the Greeks. So, but and they laugh. But it, you know, there it is in the book of Acts, and it has continued. The difference is that this is, if you will, that same argument. This is
Mm.
not, I'm tired of the argument, I'll leave and go start my own.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it's like the church is a marriage, and this marriage has gone on for 2,000 years. It doesn't mean there haven't been problems and difficulties and all of that. It's just that it's still here.
Mm.
And um, you know, I I think one of the things that I thought about Orthodoxy is like when I left the Episcopal Church, as I said, I left it instead, and I got the chance to quit saving the church in order to be in a church that was saving me.
Mm. Mm.
And that would I mean, and that to me includes even enduring the arguments,
Mm.
enduring the failures, enduring, you know, the shocking things that go on. I mean, you know, Ukraine and Russia. I mean, this is a terrible scandal, uh, and yet it's orthodoxy,
Mm.
um, and it will survive, and it will heal.
Mm.
Um, in other words, this is 2,000 years of the history.
Yeah.
Um, you know, in my life as an Orthodox priest, um, in our congregations in America, we have people from all over the world.
Mm.
You know, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. We have the same here actually in
yeah,
my church in Ireland, which is Romanian originally, but is very multinational now.
and
So,
it's an amazing, as an American, you know, in which you rule the world,
mm.
you know, and Europe speaks English now,
Mm.
uh, but um, it is, uh, it's really an amazing thing to be with people from all over the world who were not raised as Americans, who have a very different view on the world. I mean, America is really uh, a religious movement. It has
Mm.
been from the beginning. which,
Mm.
by the way, segues nicely to the question of modernity.
Mm. Well,
I mean, I
I was going to get to this because it's really interesting you say
yeah,
that. I've been to America a few times over the last few years. I have more American readers for my writing online than I do anyone else in the world, interestingly. And I've always felt the same about America, that it's primarily some kind of religious project. So, speaking of arguments, your much of your writing is an argument with modernity, it seems to me, and
yes,
your speaking as well. And that's one of the things that really interested me about your talks. There's numerous talks on that are recorded on YouTube, and conversations you've had, and writing that you've got. So there's a critique that you have, which is a critique of modernity itself, and really, as far as I can see, how it dehumanizes us, which is what I'm trying to get to in the book I've written as well. So, I mean, how would you let me put it like this. I was looking at some of the stuff you've written before, and there's something you said in one of your talks. You said the crisis of our time is a crisis of becoming human, and there's something about modernity, it seems, in your view, that is preventing us from becoming human. So what's the critique here? What is it that's going on that you're trying to get at, do you think?
well, if you will, the modern project, um, which kind of is birthed not exactly in the Enlightenment. I really would put a lot of the modern project, and I do put it back to England, not the
I'm afraid we're
continent.
responsible for a lot of it. I accept responsibility.
Yeah, it is. It's your fault.
What can I
Uh,
do?
yeah, uh, but my ancestry is all British, so I own it as well.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Um, yeah, I it if you look, say, at the English Civil War, which Americans know nothing of, I mean, who is it who comes to Massachusetts to form the Massachusetts Bay Colony? It's
Mm,
Puritans
mm,
whose cousins 20 years later overthrow Parliament and kill the king. I mean, or all of, take over Parliament, all of that, um, and are reinventing England.
yeah.
And then go over to reinvent Ireland, mostly through murder and mayhem, um, and and on the story goes. But I mean, there's a sense modernity is a Protestant heresy,
Mm,
um, as in, I mean, the heresy is we do look for a new world in Christ, but the kingdom of God is a gift that is Christ Himself. But throughout, say, a lot of Protestant world, a common prayer that you'll hear prayed is we'll talk about building up the kingdom. You can't build the kingdom. The kingdom is a gift from God. You don't have the bricks to build it with.
mm,
But you secularize that. I mean, one version of secularizing that would be Marx. You specifically, it's utopian.
mm,
And modernity has a variety of utopian visions, including that human beings uh, can be rebuilt, can be reimagined, can, the silly things my mother told me when I was a child, you can be anything when you grow up. Well, no, you can't.
mm.
I mean, there's things, um, I cannot be a Juju Wang. Uh,
No,
that kind
there's a
of
lot of things
talent,
we can't be.
that's right.
Yeah.
That kind of talent is born. It may lie undiscovered, but it is born. You can't teach it,
Mm,
and that's true of many things. Uh, but modernity, uh, in a way, to be a human being is a tradition. It's handed down to us. Uh, you learn it from other human beings.
mm,
You can't, you know, invent it yourself.
mm,
Uh, I in 1980, our first child was born, and my wife uh, wanted to nurse, which was actually had been discouraged in America. My mother did not nurse. Her mother did not nurse. All the
mm,
babies were bottle fed because science now knows, right?
mm,
Um, and our child was born early, and her nursing reflex wasn't well developed, and so she wouldn't nurse. And they did not have in America now. OBs have lactation specialists on their staff and stuff to
mm,
do this. Back then, there was nothing, and we were frustrated. My wife contacted a group called the Leche League that helped. It was like an underground movement of nursing women.
mm,
Two women came to our little apartment and spent 8 hours with my wife and newborn child, and in 8 hours essentially taught the baby how to nurse. I didn't even know you could do that.
Mm.
I mean, I won't go into details, but I remember at the time thinking, there are villages in Africa where the women know how to do this
Yeah.
and have always known how to do this.
Not
This is,
complicated. No.
yeah, this is woman knowledge. As I like to say, we've been nursing ever since we were porpoises. I mean, we are mammals, and the effrontery of modern medicine to have said to mammals, we know something better than nursing. I mean, but it's just a little slice, and we do this all the time, and so until constantly we make ourselves sick, instead of eating normally, we reinvent food. And so it's like in Isaiah 55 says, why do you eat that which is not food? That's sort of a word
Mm.
to the modern world.
Indeed.
So, um, and there's just many ways. I mean, if you look or think about the present drive of AI, or other little things going on, major things going on, um, the things that they use to talk it up, the selling points, are always about vast improvements on the horizon.
Mm.
AI will figure out how we fold proteins better, and we'll reinvent and do all of these medicines or whatever. And I think, you're gonna die.
Mm.
I
Well,
don't
not if
care.
they have their way, of course, because interestingly, if you listen to them, they don't think they are going to die. I mean,
I
it's
know.
interesting to talk about AI because there's a couple of things that come to mind when you're speaking. So I think one of the conclusions I came to when I was writing this book, I don't know if this happens to you, but when I write books, it's partly to work out what I think. Um,
Always,
and
always.
one of the, or at least to try and explain to myself what's going on in my head because like there's too much. And one of the things that became very clear was that when we talk about modernity or the West or whatever we want to talk about, whatever phrase we want to use, we're really talking about a control system. We're talking about an idea that, as you say, this notion is really about the idea that humans can control and manage everything. And that's related to a lack of belief in limits of any kind: cultural
Yes.
limits, social limits, ecological limits, natural limits. We don't need limits. Any limits are there to be busted through. Limits to our ability to do anything we want to the world are things that we have now superseded. Now that we have science, now that we have the Enlightenment, now that we have the whole myth of the kind of the rational human. And that does end in exactly the project that AI is a manifestation of. And if you listen to the people in Silicon Valley, it's a purely religious narrative. It is a Christian heresy. I mean, if anything's a Christian heresy, it's what's happening there because it's about uploading your mind into the cloud. It's about a kind of silicon version of heaven. We will live forever. We will rebuild the world. We will abolish nature and replace it with a perfected technological version. And there are people who actually speak like this. They speak like
Yeah.
the villains in 20th century sci-fi novels. It's and it's very, very open and it's very, very spiritual in its manifestation, it seems to me.
California is a spiritual place, so what can you do?
Mm,
Uh, it's spiritual, but not religious, as they say.
clearly, yes.
Is I mean, it is. I mean, heresy is actually a very dangerous thing. There's a reason, that the church says no to it, is because it destroys human beings. Now, I would even say, and this would be a biblical thing, though. In the scriptures, it says that sin comes into the world, we sin and death enters the world. And yet death is also a gift from God, at least in a world that is broken. Um, and that is, it is a limit. And it puts a limit on how bad you can get. Um, and, uh, one of the things, I mean, this to me is a sort of faith statement, I suppose, is that AI and its gurus can imagine some sort of eternalized existence, but that's just, it's a lie. It won't happen. Um, and if there was any way of, say, uploading a human mind or something like that, I mean, they've been watching too much Star Trek.
Quite a lot of
I
it, I
mean,
think. Yeah.
I mean, it would be hell.
Mm.
It's all it would
Well,
be.
it will
It
be, and
would
that's the interesting thing. It seems to me that if you listen to a lot of these visionaries, they're talking about hell. I mean, if the world that they want to create comes to be, certainly in my view anyway, my feeling, it would be hellish. I would hate to live in it, and I feel that they're unintentionally building themselves something very, very hellish that they
yeah.
imagine is going to be paradise. And that,
Well,
sorry,
I to not have. I mean, in Orthodoxy, we say the monks say that you should have death always before your eyes,
mm,
and that's not a morbid thought. That's just actually saying if you don't know you're going to die, then you won't know how to live.
mm,
The 2 years I spent as a hospice chaplain were two of the most blessed years of my life. I averaged being with 3 deaths a week. Um, and and in all of that, you're meeting people, you're talking with them, you're hearing their stories. And a lot of this was out in the mountains of East Tennessee. And so it was very rural. Uh, these are coal miner type people. It was very poverty, shacks hanging off the side of mountains. Um, and um, People of deep Christian faith, who also had never heard a seminary educated preacher.
mm,
and and in their homes, for instance, I mean, there were Baptists and Pentecostals. There was hardly anything else, but they were not educated preachers. In their homes, there were always Christian images. Uh, for instance, I never went into a home that did not have an image of Christ.
mm.
And it was almost always the single most popular image of Christ was image, the Roman Catholic image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus
Right, yeah.
with the heart and the crown of thorns on it.
Mm,
Well, if you've lived like they live, I mean, they didn't know that thing was a Catholic picture. They
mm,
had no, they never met a Catholic. I
mm,
mean, they just knew that image said Jesus loves me,
mm.
because if it's not suffering, it's not love.
Right,
They
yeah.
knew what love was, and
Mm,
they lived that. I mean, and um, some of the most blessed moments in my life were being at the bedside of some of these mountain saints as they were passing from here to there in glory. Um, I remember one woman I was with, she was just simply, she had no breath left, but she was whispering shouts of glory and praise to God and as a Pentecostal as she went. I mean, just thinking, I think that lady just stepped over into glory. I mean,
mm.
but they weren't afraid to die. And it is um, everybody's going to do it. I think one of the things that helped me in those 2 years was just getting over the fact that I'm going to die. I'm an older man now. I think about my death a lot, not again in a morbid sense, but I mean, I have a major goal in life, and that is to die well.
That's a good goal. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the last thing I get to do.
Die like a
Uh,
Christian. That's good. I
yeah,
often think about that
I
as
mean,
well. How would
I've
I die
heard,
like a Christian? Yeah.
yeah, I won't probably, I mean, white martyrdom is all we get, most of us.
Well, that's probably that's probably good. Yeah.
Yeah. But my father-in-law, who was a Baptist, was one of the greatest men of faith I've ever known. Uh, he died giving God thanks for all things, including the cancer that was killing him. Uh,
Mm.
he was, what can you do against a man like that? There's nothing you can do.
And stories like that are so alien to the modern mindset. They're certainly alien to the
Yes.
mindset I grew up with because I grew up in a very non-religious family. I come from England. There's mostly not many religious people left, unless you're from an ethnic minority. The most of the religion is to be found amongst recent immigrants. The English has sort of wandered off, although that may be changing a bit. And it's interesting that we're talking about death and suffering, um, because, as I say, this kind of talk is so alien and so offensive to so many people. And I'm sure you get this response with your writing. I certainly do, when people will say, well, how can you talk like this? Modernity has relieved a lot of suffering, it's prevented a lot of deaths in childbirth, etc. And that's true. And obviously we can't pretend it isn't true. But it seems to me that the whole drive to effectively abolish death, which is what we're going towards, and abolish suffering at the same time, is this kind of, maybe it's understandable, but maybe it isn't. It's a battle against the real, and it's a battle against the impossible. And the irony of it is that the more we try to end suffering and death, the more suffering and death we seem to create. So
Yes.
there's something to that. It seems to me that the whole drive of what we're calling the modern project, which manifests in this thing I call the machine, which is really the kind of technological exoskeleton of it, is this desire to abolish death and to abolish suffering ultimately, so that we can live in a kind of paradise of our own creation.
They there's a really dark side that should be spoken of. The true machine of modernity is an ATM. It is, I'm trying to remember, there's a Catholic philosopher here in the US who said the ontology of modernity is money.
Mm,
I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
AI right now, I mean, actually, modernity is just a large sales project.
Mm,
It always has been. Um, I mean, America, and I'm no Marxist, but America was founded by a lot of rich guys. Uh, the list for our Declaration of Independence,
mm,
and we didn't deal with our largest economic problem, which was slavery in the South,
mm,
to start with, until we had a terrible civil war over it. Um, and it was, ideologically, the writers of the Declaration of Independence knew it was wrong, including Thomas Jefferson, the primary author, who was a slave owner, but he
mm,
also knew it was wrong. I mean, we have all of this background material. They simply thought we can't pull off what we have to do to get our independence from England if we talk about this now.
mm,
But I mean, money. We have a sales project going on. AI, the massive amounts of money being poured into AI right now. I mean, and the sales project includes sort of the Wall Street thing that talks us up, and for investors who are investing money now at the beginning and will be selling out when it's gone up enough. And they don't ask questions about, will this actually improve human life?
mm.
They don't care about human life. They ask the question, will this improve my bottom line?
Yeah.
Because that's my human life. And that's the terrible darkness. I mean, America is a market,
Mm,
and we have marketed the entire world. I mean, what is America's number one export? It's American culture. And
mm,
what is American culture? It is entertainment. AI is about entertainment. It's make believe. It's Disney World. Uh, it is, I can live forever. I don't have to go to the hospital, get sick and die. I mean, all of this nonsense, when in fact you will die. You will die of something. Chances are you'll die in a hospital, and you will have lived your life in a way that can't face its own end. And the
mm,
truth is, we're dying every day. There are little ways of death. The person who crosses me, um, the the fact that I can't get my way all day long. I mean, everything. There is a spirituality, and to me, this is part of the heart of Orthodoxy. There's a spirituality of living a gifted existence. A gifted existence recognizes that my life was tradition to me. It was handed down. I come from a long line of people who survived long enough to pass on some DNA,
mm,
you know, and uh, and something before we were people. I mean, so my life was traditioned to me. Um, many of the problems in my life, I mean, are my father's problems, which were
mm,
his
mm.
father's problems before him. I've
Yes.
known enough generations of my family. When I look in my mirror, I see my father, and I see my father as an old man, and that's kind of scary.
Mm,
Um,
yes.
but I watched my father, for instance, who was a nominal don't go to church Baptist and an alcoholic when I was a child. I won't go through the whole details of his life, but at age 79, he and my mother became Orthodox.
Mm.
And they took to it like ducks to water. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, they died in the Orthodox faith as wonderful confessing Christians. Their favorite priest was a Bulgarian. My dad couldn't understand anyone who spoke with a British accent. uh, much less someone with Bulgarian. But mom and dad were living in a trailer on a farm, and this Bulgarian priest who had grown up in a farm in Bulgaria would come visit them and just feel at home because they were his kind of people. There's a
Mm,
language of people who grow things and eat what they grow. And my mother, probably like every Bulgarian farmer lady, my mother believed that for any disease in the world, there was an herbal cure somewhere,
yeah, yeah.
that God had so created his world that way. And they found ways to communicate. They took to each other.
Mm,
They found Orthodoxy to be kind of what they had always been and not known. And
yes.
that to me is, all of that really was them discovering their humanity,
Mm.
um, you know, and living into that. Um,
Yeah,
and
it's really
yes,
interesting. My wife comes from an Indian family, actually. She has the same attitude to herbs. She's obsessed with herbs at the moment.
yeah,
She's a real gardener and a herbalist, but there's something without wanting to romanticize the past as we're always accused of doing, and without, if you're a Christian, you don't need to romanticize any period of human history because
yeah,
there isn't a perfect one. So there are every period of human history is full of problems to be faced, but there is something about the modern project which is different, and it does say I spent much of my life trying to work out what it is, trying to put it in words, and some of it seems to be precisely what you're just talking about. There's a sort of a resistance to the organic in every sense of that word, a resistance to the natural, and there's a desire instead to fundamentally replace it or remake it, and the belief that we have the ability to do that. So there's a lack of humility, and it's one of the things that struck me most when I became a Christian 5 or so years ago, and I didn't expect to be a Christian. I was a Buddhist for a long time, and then I was practicing a sort of neo-pagan witchcraft, much to my shame, because I was looking for a kind of nature religion, and I was dragged out of there basically by Christ, who got me by the scruff of the neck and said, "Look, get out of there and get a grip on yourself." And then I was finally faced with the kind of a bit like C.S. Lewis, faced with the truth I didn't want to face, and so I sort of went to that. And when I finally realized that it was Christianity that was coming for me, I thought, well, I better sit down and read the Bible properly because I'd never really done it. Um, and the book that stuck with me most of all is Genesis, especially the beginning of Genesis, the creation story. And I still come back to this again and again because it seems to me that the offer that the serpent makes when he's curled around the tree, which is you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Your eyes shall be opened and you shall be as gods. If you take this knowledge that you're not supposed to have, is what we're doing every day. And what we're calling modernity, this kind of phase of the world or this way of seeing whatever it quite is. It's just that old story again. It's the same story from the beginning. This is what happens if we decide that our eyes have been opened and we want to be God now. We want to be as gods. And it's in that sense, there's nothing new about it. It's a very old story.
yes. Well, I a bulk of my ministry, and I'd say including in my writing, and something that's always in my mind when I write, if you will, is what I would call an audience of broken people.
Hmm.
Um, I don't write idealistically. Um, if anything, I mean, I do talk about death. I talk about, brain problems. Uh, and I come from a family that has a marked level of ADHD.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm glad they have a name for it now,
Hmm.
but and I've got it. It bounces around all of my children, and it manifests in various things. It's just one thing among many. Um, but you know, the sort of modernity idealizes things, and the truth is it sweeps people aside, and most people do not succeed. If you do a bell curve, everybody thinks that, being at the high, being at the best end of the bell curve is where you want to be. But most people are in the middle.
Hmm.
That's where the bulk of them are. And they're not on top, They're the C students.
Hmm.
They're they're getting
Most of us
by.
are. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I have drawn in my own writing and stuff on and I've written, to me, this is sort of doing a riff on St. Paul, that we're not saved by our excellence. We're saved by our weakness, by
Hmm.
our failures. by our brokenness, that's the place where we can know God. And by that, I would also say we're saved by our death. And that's really the good news about modernity. Modernity as a project will fail.
Mm.
It will fail. God's providence. I mean, the scriptures have. I took a take on Tolkien, who writes about the long defeat,
Yeah.
and the trajectory of history, according to the Christian scriptures, is downward.
Mm.
That it gets dark, and towards the end, it's so dark that almost no one could be saved, and that the end is a cataclysm in which God intervenes and saves us. I think that is sort of it. I mean, it's interesting that the heresy tries to take it the other way,
Mm.
you know. But God knows what He's doing, and I trust that history, even before the creation, we say that the Lamb was slain from the foundation of the earth.
Mm.
That before there was creation, the Lamb was slain. That it has been marked by the cross ever since, and always all things adhere in the death and resurrection of Christ. The cross is written into it, and the people are going to die. And in that sense, the church doesn't go out of business. It just keeps opening its door to the sick, the hungry, the naked, the failures, the losers.
Mm.
And there'll always be plenty of them, and modernity is making more and more of them.
Mm.
And
Well,
it is, if you love them, you'll be fine.
the kind of the revolutionary image of God on a cross being tortured to death has always been right at the heart of the Christian challenge. You know, St. Paul talks about
Should
it.
be.
And as you say, it's like the kind of the radical brokenness of it when Christ says, "I don't come to talk to the righteous, I come to talk to the sinners," which is 99% of us. And that's it's always struck me that when Christianity is in power, this is really problematic because, you know, it just doesn't,
Yeah.
the difficulty of you can't reconcile secular power with what actually that teaching is about and that image of the cross. However hard you try, that's not an image of worldly triumph. That's an image of, you know, God is prepared to break himself for the brokenness of the world as well. And that's an offensive image to the modern project as well, it seems to me. If you're trying to create a utopia, if you're trying to perfect everything, you can't really deal with that perspective on what God is, that claim about what God did. You know, there's
Yes,
something revolutionary about it.
it is. And I would say that is probably the unique grace in Orthodoxy, is that despite the fact that it was the imperial church of Byzantium, that history, you know, it claims to go on to 1400, but it was
Mm.
losing long before that, and from the rise of Islam and other things. And the truth is, it has been a persecuted, suffering church. Even the nasty history of the church in Russia, or all the talk that someone might have of Holy Rus, I mean, the only thing worse than being ruled by Tartars half the time was being ruled by a pious emperor,
Mm.
the Tsar. I mean,
Mm.
Ivan the Terrible kills, a third of the population. I mean, it's just insane what goes on. Um, and then, of course, its modern history was marked under the heel of the boot heel of the Turks in one area and of communism in other areas. And some of the people sort of went from one to the other with hardly any breathing space. And so I think actually one of the things that drew me towards it, I began reading after I first touched stuff in Orthodoxy, was stuff of Solzhenitsyn and other writings coming out of the Church of the Gulag and the Persecuted Church in those areas, and that you meet and know people who lived through that, as you're gifted in Ireland with Romanians who've now
Mm.
scattered all over Europe to find jobs and are taking their church with them. Um, I, I had a lot of Romanians in my parish in Tennessee. Loved them,
Mm.
wonderful
Well,
people.
sorry, go on.
But they're like the mountain people.
Mm. They are actually. It's well, I
Yeah,
mean, the stories of what happened in Romania are almost worse than the stories of what happened in Russia in many ways.
sure,
Not that
absolutely.
not that it's a competition, but it is interesting because obviously the great You know, the great criticism you'll get when you tell people you're a Christian is they'll usually come up with a sort of potted history of the oppressive church, which involves the Inquisitions and the Crusades and various other things that they don't know much
Yeah.
about. But it's also the case that, you know, people feel that the Christian church has been a threatening institution, and not without reason. And it's always that relationship, isn't it, between whenever the church is in power, when it's allied with power, it becomes a tyranny, because actually it's supposed to be a church for the suffering,
Yes.
led
Well,
by
the
a
truth
God of
is
suffering.
that everything allied with power. I mean,
Well, they're just
government.
power. Power is the
Yeah.
problem rather than the
I
church.
mean, yeah, your
But
power is the
absolutely.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that begins in the garden. Eat this and you'll be powerful. You know,
Yeah.
and it goes on when Satan says to Jesus, "Fall down and worship me, and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world." I mean, the last that is the last temptation. That, and if you will, this is just another version of the last temptation.
It is,
Uh,
isn't it?
I'll
Yeah.
give you all the kingdoms of the world.
And that would have been the wonders. You know, interestingly, but I think about that a lot as well, the temptations of Christ in the desert, because that one thing you can never say about what Jesus teaches is that it's rational or that it makes common sense, because it very
Yeah,
rarely does. And the common sense way to respond to that offer from the devil, it's very interesting, because the devil's basically saying, look, I'm the one who runs the world here, right? I'm in charge. So the
yeah,
rational thing to do would be collaborate with me, and we'll try and create things. You know, we'll make it as good as we can. And that would have been the rational thing for Christ to do, right? If he wanted
yeah,
to create
yeah.
the greatest good for the greatest number, if he wanted to be a utilitarian, if he wanted to be a modernist about it. But he doesn't do that. He says, no, I'm not, that's not my project. I'm doing something so kind of insanely inexplicable that you wouldn't even understand what I'm up to. Because
Yeah.
what Christ does in the end makes no sense from the perspective of the devil in the desert, that he's prepared to go and break himself on a cross rather than rationally taking power. But that choice is always with us every day. That's always here, isn't it?
Always. It's every moment. The One of the guys I studied under at Duke, Stanley Hauerwas, amazing man.
Yeah, I love
Uh,
him actually. He's very funny.
he is.
Mm.
Cusses like a sailor, but I love him. He he's he no, he's a layman. Um, but he taught very clearly. He said that the end of history is revealed in the death and resurrection of Christ. That is the end of history. St. Maximus would say that that's actually the beginning and the end of history. It's all
Mm.
right there. But Hauerwas would say that because the end of history has already come in the death and resurrection of Christ, Christians have nothing better to do in this world than to have children and teach them to know Jesus.
Mm. It's a good project.
And so, I mean, and something, and I pushed this. I first learned from him is that it is a heresy to. I mean, modernity wants to tell us that we're in management.
Yeah.
We are not in management. You cannot manage the outcome of history. The outcome of history was made known in the death and resurrection of Christ. It's already done. You can't do it. But because of that, there is a kind of peace that comes. And it's not the peace of doing nothing, it's the peace of living your life without having to manage the world. I don't need to manage the world. I need to live rightly in the one that was handed down to me. And so I write a lot, and I get a lot of pushback from that. I'd say you are not going to make the world a better place.
Mm.
That's a modern lie. You cannot make the world a better place.
Yes, people hate that. They don't
Oh,
like
they
it.
hate that. But they
I mean, it's
young people actually think of that as a guide to what they want to do for their life. I want to
yes.
make a difference in the world. And I'm thinking, you're not going to do it.
Mm. Well, it's
It
interesting
won't
to me.
happen.
When I was a young man, I was an activist. I was a political activist. I
Yeah.
was an environmental activist. I spent a lot of time on the front lines of things, being arrested for things, sitting up trees to stop them being destroyed. And, I would have passionately argued with someone like you back at the time and said, what are you talking about? There's so much that's wrong with the world. Like, we can't do nothing. There's a moral obligation. And when I look back on that now, I see, and again, I tried to write about this a bit in the book when I was talking about politics and what politics is, because politics and activism are what you do when you think you can manage the world, because you have to manage the world. And you think you
Yeah.
have to manage the world because you don't believe any of these claims about Jesus or God. You don't believe there's a God at all. So if you have a society which fundamentally believes, as Western, the modern West does, that look, there isn't a God probably, or if there is, he's certainly not intervening with anything. We've got science now, we've got reason. That's a superstition. We've moved beyond that. If you take that view, which is said to be the rational modern scientific view, then you've got no other choice but to manage everything because as far as you
Sure.
can see, you are God, right? And you have a responsibility. Here you are, and you look around at the state of the world and it's in a mess and the climate's changing and there's an extinction going on and there's wars everywhere. So you think, oh my God, we have to do something. And then, of course, you rush to do it. And very often you find you can't do it. And then that leads to a kind of despair. And I certainly went through all of that. And it's very interesting. And so much of that to me seems to come down to basically an atheistic viewpoint, an understanding that there is not anything beyond humans. And we have this kind of very crude version of Darwinism where we say, look, everything's just material, everything's just matter,
Yeah.
and we just happen to have evolved, and so we have to do the best. And the dark side of that kind of activist mentality, I mean, it can have a good side because there are people involved who want to make things better, but the dark side, of course, is again the kind of singularity vision, because if there is no meaning to life, and if there is no God and there is no purpose or direction, well, why not remake the whole world? Why not try to live forever? Why not? Because there's nothing to stop you. So there's a
I
kind
mean,
of despair that underlies it all.
the absurdity of it all.
Mm,
Earth is a finite thing. It's going to end.
yes.
You know, I saw a little note that said, you know, Elon Musk imagines going to Mars. Someone wrote, it's hellish. It means no, but this is not a place to live.
But you can't live there. It's impossible to live there.
I know you can't live there and you can't get anywhere else. This is all
Mm,
there is, and it's all going to end. I mean, I don't even think it's going to last that long.
no.
Uh, I think it ends before that, but and I don't think we do nothing. What we do, and I write again and again with this, do the next good thing. Uh, and I measure the good by the commandments of Christ. Uh, and in a sense, what I refuse to do is I refuse to do the math.
Mm, yeah, me
Uh,
too. I can't
it,
do it anyway. I'm terrible at it.
oh, I do the next good thing. You give a cup of cold water. Uh, you, you comfort a hurting soul. You give generously. You share what you have. You love your enemies. You don't kill people. You do the next good thing, and let God do the math. That's just I don't have to add all of that up. And the truth is, the ones who are doing the math are the ones who are counting the money.
Mm,
They don't care as long as I say, modernity's machine is an ATM.
mm. Well, they see the whole world as a math puzzle. As far as they're concerned, if they can just get the sums right,
Yeah,
then everything works out.
yeah, and the problem is that it doesn't actually make them happy. I don't meet happy people like that.
Well,
Um,
I always think, and I think I've written this a few times, but it's if the real promises, the deep promises of the modern world were true, then Americans would be the happiest people who've ever existed.
yeah.
And and the British wouldn't be far behind because we're all about as modern as can get. Well, is that really what the country looks like when you look around? Do we
Well,
look
the
think that
British
our
are
children are
constitutionally
happier?
incapable of being happy. We all know
Well,
that.
that's
It's the
because
Finns who are happy.
you're always
We don't
chasing
want
something else. This is the
to.
trap. We're always chasing something else, aren't we? There's always something that we haven't quite got yet. Always someone with more than you. There's a wonderful quote in the book that I talked from a speech about a talk that Jeff Bezos was giving. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, who's another one of these tech guys, and he has this wonderful vision of how that humanity is going to expand until it's 10 trillion people and it's going to spread across the universe. And he talks about how wonderful this is going to be because then rather than just having one Mozart, we'll have 1,000 Mozarts. And so everything will be better. And there's this kind of limitless mathematical robotic weirdness to it that it's really just about expansion and it's about numbers and it's about greatness in a very limited way. And it's difficult to listen to without wondering where these people are in their heads.
It's funny, 1,000 Mozarts, and we don't even listen to the one we've got.
Well, no, no, well, quite, yeah. I think
Yeah.
one would be enough. We could just listen to him properly.
I
Um,
mean, the quiet thing going on right now is the hollowing out of the modern mind
mm,
through through the unplanned accident of the internet.
that's
Um,
interesting. What do you mean by that?
well, um, I mean, we live on our phones, and it is isolating us so that we're not interacting with one another,
Mhm.
and all too much. And I think especially children, the unintended effects of social media in adolescence. It is,
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
and it's adolescents are tremendously vulnerable to social movements.
Mm.
In the 90s, in the 80s and 90s, there was an epidemic of bulimia, of eating disorders,
Yeah, I
bulimia,
remember it. Yes.
anorexia.
Mm.
Um, but it was among adolescents, and mostly adolescent girls, who, for a variety of reasons, I think Jordan Peterson would talk about this, but for a variety of reasons, they are the most vulnerable in these social things, although boys get it too. And we're at it today with all of the gender confusion.
Yeah.
It very clearly correlates with this. And so this is it's an unintended effect.
Mm.
No one, we do these things with one thing in mind, but we get these other things, and we have a very difficult time saying no because there's money to be made.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. People often ask me what can I do? What can I do? And I was certainly always say to parents, the most important thing you can do probably is not give your children a phone.
Absolutely.
So my children have
Absolutely.
never had a phone. I've got teenagers, they haven't got smartphones, and they're not having them either.
They
But
must they must hate you.
well, funnily enough, my son would definitely like to go on WhatsApp so he can talk to his friends. But because we brought them up without this stuff, they don't really want it. I actually think if there's one, maybe I didn't do anything else right as a parent, but I seem to have brought up teenagers who aren't desperate to be on social media at all, and they're not on there, and they can see by looking around some of the problems. And I do wonder, there's more and more people of that generation, especially of the so-called Generation Z, who can see the problems actually, and are
Yeah.
pushing against it in a way that wasn't happening even 10 years ago because they've grown up immersed in this stuff.
And what does that tell you? In a sense, those who are most immersed in it
Mm.
are also seeing its problems. It makes them sick, and they are in a vanguard saying no.
Yeah.
And that to me is, if you will, is metaphorically a kind of death
Mm.
and a resurrection,
Yeah.
that God has so created us. And so, AI will crash and burn. One of the things going on for us is here in America, where we're putting in so much money. AI is tremendously expensive and wasteful. Uh,
Enormously. The amount of energy that
it's
it uses is
draining
astonishing.
water and energy.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's absurdly so.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's crazy. I mean, what does that do? Well, it'll crash.
Well,
It'll
here in
burn.
Ireland, the economic model of Ireland for the last 20 years or so has basically been a low tax regime to attract American companies. And the
Yeah.
main companies it's tried to attract are pharmaceutical and tech companies. So we have the headquarters of a lot of the tech giants here, the European headquarters, Facebook and
Yeah.
Twitter and the rest of them. And there are data centers just popping up everywhere like poppies in the fields. And it's been estimated that possibly by the end of this decade, 70% of the electricity of the country is going to be consumed by data centers. That's mainly to power AIs. It's completely destructive and, as you say, unsustainable in every sense of the word.
I mean, I think Ireland could be saved if every foreign company that's set up there would have to adopt the name Oliver Cromwell Incorporated.
Yeah, that would make him instantly unpopular. Yeah, that would work.
Exactly.
That's a good
Exactly.
theory. I like
But
that.
yeah, but it would pull the curtain back, and they
It
would
would.
see what's going on. We have
Yes.
come to rape you with our prosperity.
Yeah, but it's much worse than Cromwell because Cromwell wasn't pulling any punches, so everybody could see what he was doing. Whereas
Well,
these guys
exactly.
these
So
guys are posing as your friends. It's much worse.
that's why I say they should be forced to
Exactly.
name themselves Oliver Cromwell so people can see what they were up to.
It's a good policy. I approve of it. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a good thought. So well, let's just we'll sort of maybe we'll end the conversation just thinking about. So we've got this great modern project which is really predicated on control, and it promises us paradise, and actually it's giving us hell. And as you said yourself, the fact that young people can see that, the fact that the thing which is supposed to attract them is in many cases repulsive to them. They feel trapped in this kind of horrible, pornified, gamified, anti-human utopia. That's the thing that gives me hope, because I think that fundamentally, ultimately, people want to be human. And
Yes.
anything that takes them away from that, even if they don't really know what that means or they don't really know what they're missing, they know they're missing something. Took me decades of my life to work out what I was missing, but there's something fundamentally inhuman about it. So what is the question people always ask me when I write about this stuff is, okay, well, what shall we do then? And usually that's a kind of political or activist question, but sometimes it's a spiritual one. So from your perspective as a as an Orthodox Christian priest or retired priest or just as a Christian, what's the thing we should be doing in our lives? What's the spirit how what does a spiritual resistance to this look like? That's the question.
Well, I think, oh gee, I'm going to sound so, we love,
Mm,
uh, radical love, um, which means laying down my life for my neighbor. And uh, that might be saying no, that might be embracing limits. It certainly means making a home for those who have not been loved. Um, I presume every time I meet someone, I mean, this orthodoxy is the most optimistic way to live because it believes that we're actually created in the image of God and created for God. We do not believe we have a fallen nature. We believe our human nature is good and it desires the good. Why were you unhappy? Why were you hungry? Why were you looking and took so long to find it? Because you have the same nature I do. Uh, I found it as a teenager in South Carolina. You find it, after wandering far in a land that is waste. And there it is in England. You know, we have these floods of Generation Z coming into the church, especially here in America. We're seeing this. Um, why? They're hungry for the same thing. And when I tell them what I found, and you tell them what you found, you discover, surprisingly, why do you have this growing audience?
mm,
It's not because you convinced anybody of anything, but
mm,
because when they read you, they they are reading their heart cry.
mm. That's interesting.
They know it, even though they didn't know they knew it. And this is the same thing to me when the gospel is being rightly preached and rightly lived and rightly shared. It has an audience of 9 billion um, that are created for it. And at its best, I mean, your wife is Indian, and I would say it's just like my mountain people with untutored preachers. Um, left alone, people inherently have a drive towards this very thing that is orthodoxy, that I find in that. And so we practice it, we live it, um, we live it following the commandment to love, to forgive, to share. Um, and I mean, it's funny that you and I do this on a Zoom, which is a
Mm, yeah.
technological piece. I write a blog, uh, which is there, but I write where people read.
Yeah.
Although I feel like I'm probably people keep telling me I should go to Substack. I don't know anything about it. I probably, I'll die blogging because I'm too old to change. But, you know, it is radical. Um, it, I mean, it brought the Roman world to its knees. Uh, it uh, it was saying there were liturgies being celebrated in the Gulag secretly. They were being celebrated uh, in Auschwitz. There's interesting stories behind some of those things. Um, it celebrated the fall of communism. Uh, when AI disappears and collapses, we'll do a liturgy to commemorate it, and there'll be something else to come along. In other words, until we're done, the battle goes on, but it's the same battle. This is just the most recent iteration of it, of man who thinks he's God. So don't be God, be a human being, become more and more fully a human being, and learn what it is. To me, Christ is the one true. He reveals what it is to be truly human. Someone said, Father John Bear, who's now back in Great Britain teaching, Aberdeen, I think, said that when Christ on the cross says it is finished, it is announcing the completion of a human project. This is following the teaching of St. Maximus that the creation does not finish until it's on the cross. That's the revelation of our humanity. It is finished. So there it is. It's a cross. And it's beautiful. It's the strangest thing. We call it Good Friday.
Yes, it's a mystery, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's a wonderful thing. It's a
Radical
wonderful
love.
thing.
Radical love as an antidote to modernity. I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm still a hippie.
Well, you've still got the beard, you know, so that's the
Oh, there
gift.
you are. I couldn't grow one back then. I was too young.
Well, you have to, all good things come to those who wait. I think that's a fantastic note to end on, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Yes.
Really appreciated talking to you.